Arrogant, rookie cop thinks his badge makes him untouchable until he brings the wrong woman to court. The night was quiet, streets empty, porch lights flickered in perfect rows, and the whole city felt like it had already gone to sleep. But not him, not Officer Ethan. He was just getting started. Sitting behind the wheel of his patrol car, he looked out over the neighborhood like he owned it. 6 months in uniform, and you couldn't tell him a thing. He already felt like he ran the place. The badge on his chest wasn't just metal. To him, it was a shield, a weapon, a crown. He'd been taught, we are the law. Not with the law, are the law. That's what his training officer always told him. You see someone acting out of place, don't ask questions. Handle it. And Ethan did exactly that. Every night, every shift. He didn't care about guilt or innocence. He cared about control. And tonight, he was looking for someone to remind. It was almost midnight when he spotted her. A sleek black SUV, spotless, rolling through the neighborhood like it belonged in a magazine. It didn't fit the scene. And neither did the woman behind. The wheel. He didn't know who she was. He didn't care. He hit the lights. She pulled over without hesitation. No panic, no sudden moves, which annoyed him more than it should have. As he walked up to her window, hand resting on his belt, he already had a story forming in his head. Swerving, suspicious, smelled like alcohol, whatever it took to justify what was coming. License and registration. She handed it over. Calm, silent. Her name, Alana. Dressed sharp. Probably made more in a month than he did in a year, but she didn't look scared. She looked steady, collected, and that made him uneasy. Do you know why I pulled you over? No, officer, she said with a tone so calm it almost sounded sarcastic. Perhaps you could enlighten me. He hated that, the way she looked, at him like she wasn't impressed, like the badge didn't matter. You were swerving, he said. Had anything to drink tonight? I wasn't swerving, and I don't drink. She looked him straight in the eye. Your dash cam will show that. There it was, the challenge. He felt his chest tighten. He didn't even think. He just said it. Step out of the vehicle. On what grounds? I said step out. He barked louder this time, already signaling backup on his radio. Unless you want resisting added to the charges, she didn't argue. Just unbuckled slowly and said, Please don't mistake any of my movements as threatening. By the time she stepped out, 2 more patrol cars were pulling in. Officers he'd worked with before. They knew how this worked. 3 cops. 1 civilian. They'd done it 100 times. Make it look messy enough and no one ever asks questions. He spun her around roughly and cuffed her before she could even ask why. Driving under the influence, he muttered. Resisting. We'll see what else we find. Still, she didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't yell. She just said one thing. I look forward to discussing this in court. And that? That scared him more than any outburst ever could. The ride to the station was silent. But in Ethan's head, alarms were blaring. Something about this didn't feel routine. She didn't act like someone used to being silenced. She acted like someone used to watching everything fall into place, her way. When they got to the station, the sergeant on duty took one look at her and raised an eyebrow. But no one asked questions. The paperwork was already being filled in. Ethan and his friends knew how to write it. Knew what phrases to use, knew how to make someone look guilty before they ever stepped foot in a courtroom. By 3 a.m., she was in a cell, and he was in the locker room, scrolling through messages from other officers. Nice collar, one text read. That one needed humbling, another said. He smirked, told himself it was just another night, just another name in a long list. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Not because he had doubts, but because she didn't. She wasn't angry. Wasn't panicking, wasn't begging, she was waiting, and something told him. When the waiting was over, everything he thought he understood about power was about to change. Forever. Alana Briggs didn't sleep. Not because the concrete bench in the holding cell was hard, or because of the flickering lights overhead. It was because she didn't need to. She had planned for this moment. The silence of the station wasn't empty to her. It was strategic. Outside her cell, officers walked past and glanced her way. Some didn't like how calm she looked. Others were smart enough to be unsettled by it. One even muttered under his breath, "Why isn't she saying anything?" But Alana had already said what she needed to. Her silence was loud enough. In the back office, Officer Ethan Carter was finishing up the arrest report. His fingers moved quickly, typing words he'd used dozens of times before. Subject appeared intoxicated, failed to cooperate, became verbally aggressive. Lies dressed up to look like facts. He didn't even think twice. That's just how it worked. You write the story before anyone else can. You frame the picture, and then no one questions what's in the frame. His buddies stood behind him, joking around like they'd just come from a night out instead of a false arrest. "Bet she's a lawyer," one laughed. Or one of those activist types, always looking for a reason to sue. But even they weren't completely at ease. Something about how she carried herself, like she wasn't surprised, left a bad taste in the air. In another corner of the station, the booking sergeant looked over her file again. No criminal record. Top-level security clearance. He frowned. "Where have I heard that name before?" he whispered to himself. But instead of following the feeling, he looked away. In this place, asking too many questions had consequences. Ethan tried to brush it off. He told himself it was just another name. Another person out of place. Another warning to people who thought they didn't have to follow his rules. But the way she looked at him during the arrest kept replaying in his mind. She hadn't flinched when he grabbed her arm, hadn't begged, hadn't looked scared. Instead, she looked like someone counting moves ahead in a chess game. And something about that made his skin crawl. Meanwhile, across the city, in a quiet office far from the station, a phone buzzed. A man in a dark suit picked it up and listened for a few seconds. He didn't speak, just nodded once and said, "Understood." Then he stood and pulled a locked case from the bottom drawer. Inside, a flash drive marked with a federal seal. The woman on that drive had just been booked by a precinct that didn't know who they were messing with. Back at the station, Carter was cleaning out his patrol car, a routine after every shift. He emptied the glove compartment, checked under the seats, then turned to grab the dashcam unit. But it was already gone. One of his fellow officers had taken care of it. Their code was simple. If the report says something different than the footage disappears. They always said, "What happens on the street stays on the street." But Alana hadn't stayed on the street. She was in their system now, and soon they'd be in hers. The next morning, the officers who arrested her showed up for their next shift like any other day. Coffee in hand, talking about sports, scrolling through their phones, the usual. But when Carter walked through the precinct doors, something felt off. The captain wasn't in his usual spot. There were people in suits standing in the hallway, unfamiliar faces, federal IDs hanging from their necks, quiet voices having serious conversations. He tried to ignore it until his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know who you just touched." He looked around. No one else seemed to have seen it. His heart started pounding, but he told himself it was probably nothing. Just someone trying to scare him. But fear wasn't new to him. He used it on others. Now, for the first time, it was knocking at his own door. In the holding cell, Alana finally stood. Not because she needed anything, but because she sensed it was time. Across the city, gears were already turning. Her people were working, pulling. Records, tracing edits, watching officers' body cams in real time. Every file Carter thought was deleted? They had backups? Every step he made? Logged. And they were waiting for the right moment to flip the switch. Carter didn't know it yet. But last night wasn't just another arrest. It was a spark, and the fire was coming. The morning light didn't feel like a fresh start. Not at the precinct. There was a strange tension in the air, something unspoken but heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. Officers walked slower. Conversations were shorter. Eyes darted without making contact. And no one was talking about her, not out loud. But everyone was thinking about her. Alana Briggs, still in holding, still quiet, still watching. Officer Carter walked in trying to act normal, but it wasn't easy anymore. His usual confidence felt thin, like it was starting to tear at the edges. He nodded at a few familiar faces, but no one nodded back the same way. Not with the usual grin or fist bump. They were waiting to see what would happen next. Captain Reynolds had called out sick, which didn't sit right with anyone. He never called out. And now, some mid-level lieutenant no one respected was trying to act like everything was fine. But it wasn't. The booking sergeant had already been pulled aside by two men in suits that didn't work for internal affairs. No one knew what they said, but afterward, the sergeant looked pale and left the room without saying a word. Meanwhile, Alana hadn't asked for a phone call, hadn't demanded anything. She just sat there, still, calm, quiet. That kind of calm doesn't come from confidence. It comes from control, and that scared them more than any outburst ever could. Carter tried to distract himself by going through the morning reports. A few drug busts, a domestic call. Nothing big. Nothing that should matter more than what was really going on. But every time he looked at her name on the arrest list, his stomach tightened. He knew the script. He'd followed it before. Officer sees suspicious activity. Officer claims driver was swerving. Officer detects slurred speech, possible alcohol. Officer calls for backup. Suspect refuses commands. Minor force used. Charges filed. Case closed. Except this one wasn't closing. It was opening something big. The whispers had started quietly. Just small remarks in the hallway. You heard about that woman Carter picked up? Word is she's not who we thought. Feds are sniffing around, real ones. Not just IA. He tried to block it out. Pretend it was just gossip. Just rumors, made up by bored cops. But by noon, 3 officers who'd been there during Alana's arrest were suddenly reassigned. No explanation, just gone. Another one, Officer Blake, had been scheduled to testify on a different case. He didn't show up. Carter overheard someone say, "He's talking to someone downtown, lawyers maybe." That hit harder than he expected. Why? Would Blake talk to lawyers? Why now? And then there was the look from Officer Ramirez. She was usually friendly, one of the few who made rookie officers feel human. But today, when she passed Carter in the hallway, she didn't say anything. Just looked at him like she didn't know who he was anymore. Or maybe like she did. In the locker room, Carter tried to pull himself together. He stared at his reflection in the mirror above the sink. Same uniform, same badge. But his face looked different. Tired. Uneasy. Not quite sure of itself. He ran cold water and splashed his face, trying to reset. It didn't help. Then his phone buzzed. No name. Just a number. No words. Just a photo. It was a screenshot of him at the traffic stop. Body cam angle. Alana in the frame. Her hands clearly visible. Compliant. Calm. The caption below read, "Still want to lie in court?" His heart dropped. He hadn't sent the video to anyone, and the footage was supposed to be erased. Supposed to be. He rushed to find Taylor, the other officer who'd been there that night. Taylor was sitting in the break room, nursing a coffee, like it was his last comfort in the world. "Did you see this?" Carter asked, showing him the message. Taylor didn't even look surprised. "Yeah," he said flatly. "Got the same one. So did Foster." Carter's jaw tightened. "What does this mean?" Taylor looked at him, expression blank. "It means we're not the ones watching anymore." That hit hard. Too hard. They used to be the ones in control. They decided what happened, who got arrested, what went in the report, what footage malfunctioned. But now someone else had the controls. Somewhere in the city, people were putting together pieces they didn't even know had been left behind. And Alana? She was just waiting, not for justice, for the right moment, the next one, because the real story hadn't even started yet. It was supposed to be a simple court appearance, a standard arraignment. In and out. Officer Ethan Carter sat at the front of the courtroom, dressed in full uniform, clean-shaven, polished boots, badge shining. He practiced his posture in the hallway mirror before walking in. Strong shoulders, firm jaw, calm face, looked like the one in control, because that's what everyone expected from him. That's what he expected from himself. The courtroom filled with the usual sounds, shuffling papers, low voices, the hum of air conditioning overhead. Officers filled the benches behind him, blue uniforms lined up in quiet rows. Some were here to support him. Some came out of curiosity. A few just wanted to see what the fuss was all about. But all of them carried the same question inside. Who is this woman really? When Alana Briggs entered the room, it didn't feel dramatic. She didn't walk in slow or with a bodyguard. She wasn't flanked by press or high-priced lawyers. She walked like someone who belonged in every room she entered. And that quiet, confidence again, said more than any uniform could. She wore a dark navy suit, tailored but simple. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp. She took her seat beside a man Carter didn't recognize. Mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses. Lawyer, obviously. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The clerk called the case number, and just like that, the lies were about to meet reality. "Your Honor," her lawyer said, standing with a sealed envelope in his hand. "Before we enter a plea, we respectfully request the court review this document immediately." That wasn't normal. Carter knew the flow, knew the rhythm. You don't interrupt a hearing like that unless you have something big. The judge, clearly annoyed, motioned for both attorneys to approach the bench. They huddled in silence for a moment. The judge opened the envelope. His expression barely changed at first, but then something shifted. His hand stopped flipping pages. His jaw locked. He adjusted his glasses and stared down at the paperwork longer than anyone expected. And when he looked up, he didn't look at the defense attorney. He looked at Alana directly, then at Carter. His voice was flat, but louder than usual. "Clear the courtroom." Confusion rippled through the rows of officers. Prosecutors objected. The DA stood and said, "Your Honor, this is a public proceeding." I said, "Clear the courtroom." Everyone. Now. Except Officer Carter. Silence. The shuffle began. Quiet footsteps, mumbled voices. No one looked at anyone else. One by one, they filed out. Some looked back at Carter. Most didn't. When the room was empty, the judge removed his glasses, rubbed his temples, then looked at Alana and said, "Would you please state your full name and position for the record?" Carter's stomach turned. Alana stood. Calm as ever. "Colonel Alana Victoria Briggs, U.S. Military Intelligence, Domestic Operations Oversight Division." The silence that followed was deafening. Military. Intelligence. Oversight. Carter swallowed. Hard. His thoughts scrambled. Her lawyer added, She has been assisting with an ongoing federal investigation involving this department and others. The judge didn't even blink. He just said, "Officer Carter, please remain seated and silent. You're now part of a formal judicial review." Carter couldn't move. He didn't know how to react. His mouth was dry, his hands cold. The room had flipped, and the badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. Alana's attorney stepped forward again. "With the court's permission, I'd like to introduce Special Agent Walker, Department of Justice." Man seated quietly in the back stood. Carter hadn't even noticed him come in. Walker walked to the front like he'd done this 100 times before. "We've been conducting an investigation into coordinated corruption within multiple precincts. This arrest was the moment we were waiting for to make our first move." The judge gave a slow nod. "Then you have it." He turned to Carter. "All charges against Colonel Briggs are dismissed, effective immediately, with prejudice." It was over, just like that. And yet it was only beginning. The judge leaned forward. "Furthermore, based on the information presented to me today, I am ordering an emergency investigation into this officer's conduct, the arrest procedures used, and all parties involved." Carter couldn't speak, couldn't think. His thoughts were drowning in panic. It was unraveling. Right there in the courtroom. Alana turned to him, calmly, and said her first direct words since the night of the arrest. "This isn't revenge. This is accountability. You never should have touched me." The federal agent stepped closer. "We'll be talking, Officer Carter. A lot." Outside the courtroom, reporters were already gathering. News had leaked. Microphones waited. Cameras rolled. Inside, Carter sat frozen. Not a hero. Not a protector. Not the one in control. Just a rookie cop who thought the badge made him untouchable. But in the end, it only made him easy to find. The silence inside the precinct the next morning wasn't peaceful. It was tense, heavy. Like everyone knew a storm had passed, but another, much bigger one was on the way. Nobody said her name. Not out loud. But they didn't need to. Everyone was thinking it. The arrest had gone sideways. The courtroom turned into a battlefield. And Officer Carter, once the golden rookie, was now radioactive. No one wanted to stand too close. The whispers, though, louder than ever. "She's federal?" They said she had clearance no one in this building could touch. "I heard 3 other departments are under review now, too. They got a file on everything. Every false report, every missing video." Carter walked into the station like a man holding onto a dream that was slipping through his fingers. His badge was still pinned, his uniform still clean. But his steps were slower. He kept checking over his shoulder. The eyes of his co-workers, some sharp, some nervous, some blank, followed him like shadows. He tried to pretend. Pretend it was all still normal, that this was all a misunderstanding, that it would blow over. But as he passed the bulletin board, he noticed something new. A flyer. "Federal oversight begins Monday. All officers to be reviewed." He stopped for a second longer than he meant to. Then he saw it. An unfamiliar man standing beside the lockers. No uniform, no badge. Just a quiet presence, arms folded, eyes scanning everyone. Watching. Recording. Internal affairs? No. Higher. Much higher. Inside the captain's office, a closed-door meeting had been going on all morning. The captain wasn't yelling, but his voice carried through the wall anyway. "I warned him. I told him to drop it. You can't just arrest someone like that and not expect blowback." He wasn't defending Carter. He was distancing himself. Carter tried to walk to his desk, but stopped short when he saw the box. His stuff. Already packed. No note, no explanation. Just his name written in black marker on the lid. That's how fast. It moves when the system starts protecting itself. One minute you're their star rookie. The next, you're a liability they don't want to be seen standing next to. He picked up the box and carried it to his car in silence. On the way, he passed 3 officers in the parking lot, guys he trained with, guys he'd celebrated wins with, guys who had laughed with him, backed him up on questionable stops, signed off on shaky reports. Not one of them made eye contact. That hurt more than the courtroom did. At home, Carter sat on the edge of his couch and stared at nothing. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Texts, missed calls, silent rings. He didn't answer any of them. Some messages were from other officers. "We good? You keeping your mouth shut? They're digging, man. You didn't give them anything. Yet, right?" Others were from numbers he didn't recognize. "Come clean while you still can. They're coming for all of you. You're not the only one they've got footage on." He closed his phone and dropped it on the floor. He couldn't block it all out. Not anymore. By afternoon, things got worse. One of the officers from that night, Taylor, was called in for a private review. He didn't come back. An hour later, Officer Foster left the building with his badge in a Ziploc bag and a pale look on his face. It was happening fast now. The walls were falling in. And Alana? She hadn't said a word publicly. No press statements, no interviews, no social media posts. But somehow her silence echoed louder than any press conference ever could. She didn't need to speak. Others were speaking for her. Across the city, small reports started popping up. Blog posts, anonymous articles, quiet leaks. People were talking. Civilians who'd been stopped unfairly. Former officers who'd quit because they couldn't be part of it anymore. Even someone from dispatch had posted anonymously, "They train you to look the other way." I saw the patterns. I knew something wasn't right. Every click, every comment, every post added to the weight pressing down on Carter's chest. This wasn't going away. Later that evening, he received a call from a blocked number. He let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, the message came through. "They know everything, and it's not just about you anymore. They're going after the whole department. You can take the fall alone, or start talking. Fast." He sat there staring at the wall as the message played again in his head. Then another buzz. This time, just a photo. It was a shot of him years ago, with his training officer, back when he first joined. Both of them smiling, hand on shoulder. Badge freshly pinned, pride in their eyes. He'd believed it then, that he was doing something noble, that the badge made him right. Now, it just felt like a mask he'd worn too long. That night, he finally opened his laptop, created a blank document, and typed 3 words. It started here. The cursor blinked at him, still sitting in that blank document, waiting. 3 words typed hours ago. It started here, and nothing else. Ethan Carter stared at the screen, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Outside, the sun had gone down. Inside his apartment, the only light came from his laptop. Everything else was dark, silent. His badge was still sitting on the kitchen counter, right where he'd tossed it after coming home. But now it looked different. Smaller somehow, less powerful. Just metal and plastic pretending to be authority. The messages kept coming, some angry, some scared, some pleading. "They'll come for you next? You were just doing your job. Don't let them make you the example. Stay loyal. We'll protect you." Loyal. That word echoed in his mind like a threat. He used to believe in loyalty. Loyalty to the badge. Loyalty to the department. Loyalty to the brotherhood, but now, that same brotherhood wasn't answering his calls, wasn't standing beside him, wasn't even pretending to care if he drowned. He checked his phone again. Reflex, more than anything. One new voicemail. This time, the voice was familiar. His old training officer, the one who taught him everything. The one who whispered, "This is how we really do it." The message was short. "Don't be a fool, kid. You go down, you go alone. We warned you. Don't test how deep this runs." Carter sat back, swallowing hard. He remembered his first night, on patrol, nervous, wide-eyed, wanting to do good. And then came the little nudges. You don't have to report that. No one will ask if the footage is gone. This is how the city stays clean. It all felt normal after a while. Routine. Everyone did it. Everyone smiled about it. Sometimes they called it cleaning up the streets. Other times they just said he had it coming. But now he realized the whole thing was a lie wearing a uniform, and he'd played right into it. His phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from a name he hadn't seen before. Walker, DOJ tomorrow. 10. Bring everything, or don't come at all. He knew what it meant. This was his shot. His only one. Either come clean or be buried. He barely slept that night. Too many memories. Too many questions. Was he a bad cop? Or just a scared one? And did it matter? The next morning, he showed up at the federal building, early. No uniform, no badge. Just a flash drive in his pocket and something heavier on his shoulders. Shame. He was escorted through quiet halls. Security doors opened with coded buzzes. Nobody spoke. They didn't need to. They already knew who he was. Agent Walker was, waiting in a glass-walled interview room. Calm, professional, unblinking. You came, he said. I don't know if that makes me brave or just desperate, Carter replied. Probably both, Walker said. Sit down. He did. And for the next 4 hours Carter talked, he talked about the traffic stops that never made sense. The reports that didn't match the video. The kids who vanished after being arrested. The edited footage. The pressure to keep quotas. The meetings where higher-ups hinted at what should go in the reports and what shouldn't. He named names, described patterns, connected dots. And every time he thought he was finished, Walker just asked one thing. What else? Because there was always more. It wasn't just one night, or one arrest, or one bad decision. It was a culture. A machine. A system built to protect itself. And if you didn't play along, you got chewed up. Or thrown out. Or worse, disappeared. By the end of it, Carter sat back, exhausted. He wasn't crying. But he looked like he could have. Walker looked at him, serious but calm. Do you know what happens next? Carter nodded. You'll use it all. Build your case. Tear it all down. Walker didn't respond at first. He just slid a small stack of papers across the table. A statement of cooperation, he said. You sign it, we move forward together. But I'm going to be honest. This doesn't erase your part. You still participated. You still lied. You still hurt people. I know, Carter said quietly. But it could save lives now. He didn't hesitate. He signed. And just like that, he crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Back at the precinct, things were already unraveling faster. Officers were disappearing from shifts. Administrative leave, they were told. But no one believed it. Desks were being cleaned out without warning. Laptops were missing. Body cams pulled. One officer showed up for work and found a federal agent sitting at his desk instead. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody smiled. They just clocked in, stayed quiet, and waited for the knock. And in a downtown media office, stories were already being written. Leaked footage, whistleblower testimonies, financial records, dash cams that weren't supposed to exist. One headline read, Federal agent wrongfully arrested, uncovers network of corrupt officers. Another, police reports doctored for years, former officer speaks out. Carter didn't read them. He didn't have to. He was in them. His name, his face, his voice. And the truth that used to terrify him was finally doing something new, setting him free. Not from consequences, but from silence. And now, it was the system's turn to be scared. Touchy. Courtroom was packed, not with the usual bored faces and half-listening officers. This time, it felt different. Real. Reporters filled the front row. Victims' families sat together in tight rows behind them. Some had photos pinned to their shirts. Some just sat with folded hands and silent eyes. This wasn't just a trial. Anymore, it was a reckoning. Officer Ethan Carter, no longer in uniform, stood before the judge, dressed in a plain gray suit. He looked older than his years, not because of time, but because of what time had revealed. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that stretches so long it forces you to listen to your own breath. Judge Harrison read through the sentencing, notes slowly, deliberately. "Mr. Carter," he began, "you were not the architect of this system, but you were a willing participant in it. You allowed yourself to become the face of something cruel, something broken, something that hurt far more people than you will ever know." Carter didn't look up. He already knew the words before they were spoken. "But you also made a choice," the judge continued. "You came forward. You told the truth when it mattered. And because of that, we have names, records, evidence, and for the first time in years, we have accountability." There was a pause, then the words that made it real. "You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in federal prison." A rustle moved through the room, quiet gasps, shifting feet. No one cheered, no one clapped, because this wasn't a celebration. It was a funeral for the lies that had lived too long. As Carter was led from the courtroom, he glanced sideways. And there she was, Alana Briggs, still calm, still watching. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't show triumph, only truth. And Carter understood this was never personal. It was necessary. Weeks passed. The country didn't just watch. It reacted. The footage leaked to the press. Videos of young men and women falsely arrested. Emails showing pressure from above to manipulate quotas. Payroll records linking high-ranking officers to private security firms and prison contracts. The system didn't just crack. It collapsed. Multiple cities launched independent investigations. Departments that once carried themselves like armies now stood stripped of their armor. Dozens of officers resigned quietly. Others were escorted out in cuffs. Judges were suspended. Prosecutors forced to explain why hundreds of cases were processed without question. What had been a small traffic stop turned out to be a loose thread. And when Alana Briggs pulled it, everything unraveled. Not because she was loud, not because she made speeches, but because she knew where to look. In a quiet federal facility across the country, Carter sat on his cot and stared at the same photo every night. Not of him in court, not of him in cuffs, but a photo from his academy graduation, smiling, hopeful, proud, a version of himself that didn't know what was coming. He kept it not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder, a scar that didn't heal over, and shouldn't. Few times, other inmates would ask why he wasn't in Gen Pop. He never answered. They already knew he was the cop who flipped. The one who testified? Some called him a rat, others whispered hero. He didn't answer to either, because he knew what he was. Someone who once got it all wrong, but finally decided to do one thing right. Outside the prison walls, the world kept moving, but it moved differently now. Departments were forced to install real oversight systems. Civilian review boards gained power. Body camera laws were rewritten. And most importantly, victims were finally heard. Some of them even got justice. Not all, but more than before. And sometimes, that's the start of something better. Alana stood before a panel in Washington, her posture straight, her voice calm. She wasn't giving speeches to inspire. She was giving proof. Tangible. Painful. Undeniable proof. That corruption doesn't wear one face. It wears many. Badges, robes, briefcases, political pins. and it hides best in places we're taught to trust. But trust is not blind. It has to be earned and held accountable. When the panel asked her if she considered the operation a success, she didn't give them a simple yes. She said, "We exposed one network, but the structure behind it still exists in other places. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning." Somewhere, in a town no one's watching yet, another rookie officer is pinning on a badge, feeling powerful, feeling righteous, and maybe he'll become the kind of cop that serves. Or maybe he'll become the kind that needs to be stopped. That choice doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, little ones, when no one's watching. That's where power gets tested, and that's why this story matters, because a badge doesn't make you untouchable. It never did. Truth does. And in the end, it's the only thing that can.